On today's show, it's another preseason divisional crossover. On today's show, we are going to catch up with the guys over at Locked On Senators. And the big question is, what is the effect on the new ownership?
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this special crossover edition between the Locked On Florida Panthers and Locked On Ottawa Senators podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making both Locked On Panthers and Locked On Senators your first listen of the day. For everyone on the Senators feed, my name is Armando Velez. You can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show account on X at LO_FLA Panthers and on Instagram, and very thankful to be doing another preseason divisional crossover. On today's show, we have the guys over from Locked On Senators, Brandon Pillar and Ross Levitan. What's up, guys?
Not much. Thanks for having us, Armando. Does it feel like you just stopped covering last season? It ended like 2 weeks ago for you.
Short off seasons are certainly great. I mean, in the last 10 years, the Ottawa Senators kind of had something of that after making the Eastern Conference Final in 2017. So short off seasons are really great to definitely experience. There's no shortage of topics, especially during the summer when you don't have to squeeze in where you don't have to lengthen out so many things to come up with as how the team can get better. So, and speaking of getting better and going forward to this season, I want to start with the Ottawa Senators side of things for you guys and all, and a few changes going on in the off season for Ottawa, and a few of them, and a big one is ownership, especially of course Eugene Melnyk passed, and there's the questions of whether his daughters were going to continue owning the team. They decided eventually to sell the franchise, and there's those talks about LeBreton Flats as far as their new arena. Definitely got to be something exciting for the franchise. But talk to us a little bit about the effects of new ownership in Canada's capital.
Yeah, it's really, really nice and a refreshing atmosphere in Ottawa, Armando, with new ownership coming in here, because this is a team, a franchise that, other than the Eastern Conference Final, like you just mentioned, back in 2017, it's been a lot of lows, a lot of downs, a lot of frustrated Sens fans. But now new ownership comes in. The core pieces that they got from tearing it down and rebuilding are all on the main squad now and thriving. Most of them locked up to long-term contracts, which is very, very nice to see if you're a Sens fan that's used to having players leave rather than stay. But what Michael Andlauer does is he brings a wealth of hockey knowledge. He's an owner of an OHL team, the Hamilton Bulldogs. He was a minority owner of the Montreal Canadiens for quite some time. We're glad he switched sides. He's on the good side now. You love to see that. But his whole pitch the entire time is no gimmicks, no flashy celebrity joinings, no big press conferences. He was always about, I'm going to come in and provide stability, and we're going to focus on maintaining a good product on the ice and building the right executives, upper management, having everyone working together to make this hockey team as successful as possible. And that's all the Senators fans want here. And I do believe that he's going to be able to do that. You've seen massive moves that he has kind of influenced already, big contract signings, free agents being brought in, trades, changes in the upper office. Today, a bunch of new coaches and scouting announcements made as well. So the future is much brighter now, Armando, than it has been in a while in Ottawa. That's for sure.
Yeah, and one of those free agent signings included Jonas Corposalo is definitely a big one. The Cam Talbot experiment was a rocky relationship there as well, and maybe we could see bubble Corposalo back and with the Ottawa Senators finished the last season with the Los Angeles Kings, and also you talked about the core locked up as well. And one of them is actually a very recent extension in Jake Sanderson, 6'2", 181 pounds, 32 points in just under 80 games, and a guy who can join on the rust and very responsible with his pinches as well, and a guy who doesn't actually go to the box a lot, only 12 penalty minutes last season as well. I don't think it's much of a risk as a lot of people are pointing it out to be. I mean, the most recent 32 Thoughts podcast was discussing comparing Kirill Kaprizov and Matthew Boldy's contract as guys who played less games and got long-term deals as well. But so, what are the thoughts of Jake Sanderson getting his extension with the Sens?
I said it like this. Look, the 2020 draft was going to make or break this franchise no matter which way you slice it. They had 3rd and 5th overall. Tim Stützle went 3rd overall. He's already locked up for 8 more years. And now Jake Sanderson coming in at 5th. And he is the exact prototype that the Senators missed for years on the back end. That defensive defenseman that you just don't have to worry about. And he's got that modern day style to him where he's also got amazing foot speed. He's very quick and agile and has amazing vision. So for him having 32 points as his rookie year, I think that's just scratching the surface. The comparable we always typically use with him is Miro Heiskanen out in Dallas, who exploded offensively this year. But that was his 5th year in the league, first time cracking 40 points. Before that, he was still seen as an amazing defenseman because even though he's not putting up a ton of points, he's of value defensively is enormous. So I think Senators fans are super excited about the trajectory of him. We really sunk our teeth into North Dakota and followed them the last number of years. They had 4 Senators prospects in there, all 1st and 2nd round picks. So we got to watch him develop. I think if he didn't get hurt and then re-injured at the Olympics, yeah, already an Olympian. I know no NHLers, but still a great kind of nod to have on your belt. I think you're looking at a guy who would be in that Hobey Baker conversation in his 2nd year. He was dominating in the NCAA. And in the 1st year, it was very much like, hey, just no mistakes. And then the 2nd year, it's go time. So I think Senators fans are hoping that same trajectory, get comfortable 1st year and then kind of go and push forward. So I would say if you're in a fantasy hockey pool coming up and it's a late round, you're like, oh man, Jake Sanderson's on the board, not a ton of points. I think we could see a huge rise in how much he's putting up offensively next year. And I don't think Senators fans really see the risk as much as fans of other teams. And it's fair. I get it, seeing a risk. But if there's a guy who you're going to bet on, this is one who I'd make that on.
Yeah, and when it comes to locking up the blue line as well, and then of course one thing that was spoken about with the Ottawa Senators last year was how on paper their top 6 looks great. Of course, they lose Alex DeBrincat in the offseason, not wanting to be in Detroit and not wanting to be in Ottawa. There's that quote from Timmy Stützle, and I'm paraphrasing this, but basically saying "see ya" to Alex DeBrincat as well.
Peace.
And when I think of it as just when it comes to the Senators and their last 2 drafts, not a lot of high picks and lack of draft capital as well. Trading for DeBrincat, trading for Jacob Chikrin as well. The way I see it, it's go time for the Senators and new ownership. There's a lot of pressure, and now DJ Smith has been there for a while of 467 points percentage. Pierre Dorian had an Eastern Conference final, then a teardown. It's not about whether the seat is hot or not, but how hot is it for those guys? Because from what I'm seeing, they're in lockstep with their contracts expiring in 2025, but you never know with a new ownership.
No, I completely agree. And I want Pilsy to pick up on this, but I'll just tell you the only coaches that are longer serving than DJ Smith in the NHL, John Cooper, 2 Stanley Cups, Mike Sullivan, 2 Stanley Cups, Jared Bednar, Stanley Cup, Rod Brindamore definitely didn't get swept by the Florida Panthers. Just wants you to know that. But obviously his regular season success speaks for itself. And Craig Berube, Stanley Cup. So you're in this situation, then it's DJ Smith. So he's the 7th longest serving head coach in the league. There's no excuses. How hot is this seat? The Senators, 16 games into the season, are going to Sweden. And for me, he needs to earn that trip to Sweden with an above 500 record. If the Senators, who play 9 of their first 13 games at home, if they cannot be over 500 in middle of November, that's the seat is eject button time. But I do have a bit of confidence. He's shown that he's been stubborn, but he's shown an ability to adapt at times as well. Sometimes people say too little, too late. But Pilsy, do you think that he has it in him?
Well, I think I'm more lenient towards DJ Smith than I think the rest of the Sens fan base is, because for most of his tenure here, he's had a roster that is terrible. God-awful dumpster fire rosters trying to rebuild. Last year, sure, he had a better roster, but it was riddled with injuries at the end of the year when it mattered most, and there wasn't a whole lot he could do. Now, am I saying he's the best coach and he belongs with those other guys Ross mentioned? No, I don't think so. But I do believe that you're really only as good a coach as your players believe you are. And Brady Tkachuk, the captain, the leader of this franchise, has come to DJ Smith's aid multiple times. I really do believe that Smith's voice hasn't gone stale in this dressing room yet. I think the core believes in them. They got a better roster now, so they have a chance. But there's only so much time you can give a guy. And when you just paid $950 million for a team, if things don't go right away, I can guarantee you that Michael Andlauer has a list of candidates that he likes that are kind of ready and waiting if this season doesn't start the way that he believes it should. And with the roster and the money that the Ottawa Senators are spending right to the cap, there's no reason why this team can't be successful. Now, that's as far as the coach goes. If you want to throw the GM in here as well, Armando, I think Pierre Dorian has done a couple things to kind of give himself a bit of a longer leash. The Tarasenko signing was a nice one. I think that's a lot of good value. And then, sure, the Alex DeBrincat trade wasn't a home run, but with the leverage that he had, which wasn't much, everyone knew Alex DeBrincat wanted out. I think he did okay. And the additions of Kubalik and Tarasenko should be able to make up for the scoring production that left when Alex DeBrincat went to Michigan. And then they got a goalie. It remains to be seen how Korpisalo is going to do, especially over a 5-year term. But
third swing at a goalie.
That's the thing. Like he's had a couple misses. 3 strikes are out. So let's see if he can hit this one out of the park here. But the key thing is, I think all those things are little things. All I care about mostly, and I think what Sens fans care about, is lock up the core pieces. And that's what he's done. Brady Tkachuk locked up. Tim Stützle locked up. Tom Chabot locked up. Now Jake Sanderson locked up. And then Korpisalo on a 5-year deal. Josh Norris as well. I forget if I mentioned him. But he's got the main guys that he needs here for a while. And you can just plug and play the pieces around it if need be. So I would definitely say DJ Smith's seat is a little hotter than Pierre Dorian's. But like you mentioned, Armando, with the new owner coming in, nothing is for certain here.
And I think where you can talk about Pierre Dorian kind of cooling his own seat off a bit is that Tim Stützle extension. He hasn't even played a game on it yet. He's already a 90-point player. It really was remarkable. He was able to lock him up for what he did when he did. So I think that should be really seen as something that he's been able to bring to the table. Where Ottawa's had a lot of trouble is identifying depth pieces that can help them over the last number of years. And one of their most recent additions to the front office is a full-time analytics staff member. Believe it or not, they were the only team, or maybe not the only team actually, but they were a team that had never hired a full-time analytics employee. So I think that they can help make the difference between identifying a good bottom 6. Everyone knows who the stars are. Like, doesn't take us, a math guy to figure that one out. But I do think for the more depth pieces, he could be a big help to maybe saying, hey, Pierre, we don't need to give up an asset for Patrick Brown, who's going to leave in 10 games and do absolutely nothing. I really do think that could have a positive impact into identifying talent.
Yeah, and depth pieces, especially like Ridley Gregg is a highly touted prospect as well. Shane Pinto is one as well, and then bringing in Dominic Kubalik as well. And it's especially with having a backup in Anton Forsberg as well, who unfortunately tore both of his MCLs last season. So definitely something that Sens are hoping to have a little bit of health in that side, but we're going to discuss that more on in the third segment. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we are going to have Ross and Brandon ask me quite a few Florida Panthers questions ahead of this 2023-24 season. But first, we are going to tell you all about FanDuel Sportsbook. And football season has kicked off, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to win all season long. Go Dolphins! Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can play. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon.
Welcome back to a crossover edition of the Locked On Senators, Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We're excited to have Armando Velez here, as we'll give him a break from hosting. This guy's been covering playoff games left, right, and center, and a busy offseason for the Florida Panthers as well. Now, Pilsy and I were talking on Locked On Senators, trying to identify the teams above Ottawa that they are most likely to be able to knock off the pedestal, the playoff pedestal that the Panthers were able to have, the Lightning, the Leafs, and the Boston Bruins. I know Boston's always the sexy pick. Oh, they're going to regress. They're going to regress. They never do. So we both identified the Florida Panthers. You know why? Because the Stanley Cup final hangover is real. That's a lot of extra hockey. First things first, are the Panthers going to be 100% healthy at the start of the season, or were some of those off-season surgeries going to trickle into the season?
Well, latest report from George Richards of Florida Hockey Now was actually a conversation that he actually had with Bill Zito about Brandon Montour and Aaron Ekblad, and looks like that Brandon Montour is going to be the one to return earlier than Aaron Ekblad. There's videos of his rehab. Chances are that Monty could be on the ice in September, but not necessarily play a game yet. While Aaron Ekblad maybe somewhere around December and January for the Cats. So it's gonna, like, as far as I haven't made any predictions as far as standings, even though I'm hoping for the Florida Panthers to get back into the dance. I mean, they went through of their fair share of injuries towards this tail end of the Stanley Cup final, which Alexander Barkov just recently went on 32 Thoughts and spoke about how if it was the regular season, guys would be out for multiple games. They wouldn't even be playing. But yeah, those are going to be the guys who are going to be out to start this season. And the Bill Zito signed some guys on the blue line who are looking to prove something and maybe get a contract past this year, even if it's not with the Panthers. You're talking about Oliver Ekman-Larsson as one. Mike Riley is one as well. Nico Mikkola, he got some term on his deal for the Florida Panthers, more of a stay-at-home defenseman as well. He's the Mark Stahl replacement as well. And then guys who are they're hoping to take that next step, especially on the blue line. Josh Mahura, a guy that they claimed off of waivers from the Anaheim Ducks last season as well. And the big signing for the Panthers that got me excited the most was Evan Rodriguez, a guy who played with Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon in back-to-back years, just going into his 30s. So he's possibly going to be playing on a line with Alexander Barkov to start the season. And there's guys who are hoping to take that next step, which I'm hoping that the Panthers do get an extension done with Anton Lundell before the season starts, because the way his Stanley Cup final ended, you never know if he's going to be exploding for this upcoming season, and you want to get that extension done now. And I know we were talking about Jake Sanderson in the last segment, but when you talk about an extension for Anton Lundell, which I'm thinking it's going to be a bridge deal, I mean, Elliot Friedman also talked about the cap going up. We've spoken about on my show the $4 million rise in next season, but one thing I haven't spoken about is the season after, a $5 million dollar raise for the salary cap. At least that's the hope. Yep. So that's really what I'm hoping that happens this season as far as locking it down. And it's also going to, one thing is going to be key as well is the development of Spencer Knight. He's back from the Players Assistance Program, which is great to see. Think he looks to be in a definitely in a better place than when he did go into it in February. So that's going to be key for the Florida Panthers as well.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to touch on mostly, Armando. You talked a lot about the forwards and the decor, but the goaltending in Florida is very interesting. Like, you still got Bob there on that massive deal, but do you believe that he can have the kind of success he had in the playoffs back in the regular season? Because I feel like with Bob, he's been able to show flashes of brilliance and his old self, but never sustainably over a long period of time. And that's where Spencer Knight and some of the other goalies had to pick up the slack there. What is your confidence level with Sergei Bobrovsky heading into this season?
Uh, Before I get into Sergei Bobrovsky, I'm going to put a little bit of a shameless plug here. I do have an article coming out on
Nice.
Sergei Bobrovsky of Florida Panthers Mythbusters. Some one myth that he definitely busted was his playoff performance. So be on the lookout for that in a few days when it does get released. But as far as Sergei Bobrovsky, I can't even tell you that I saw what happened especially in the second or third round coming for the Florida Panthers. A 915 save percentage throughout the run, and this is a guy who gave up 9 goals in the clincher of the Stanley Cup final as well, and just the hit to put the team on his back, and just to, and especially when the whole chase for the Stanley Cup happened, the ESPN Plus docuseries that happened. You just see how locked in he is, how he's never too high whenever a win or a loss happens. The focus is just to play hockey, to be the leader on this team, to be a guy who is going to speak on when it comes to his play. And there's a lot of questions when he came in after game 3 of round 1, and game 4 didn't look so great. I mean, yeah, Aaron Ekblad didn't play game 4 of round 1, and Anthony Duclair was a late scratch in that one. And then the Panthers were boat raced in that one as well. They were boat raced in game 3 as well. And what happened after that was just something I couldn't definitely not predict. I mean, there was a high scoring game in game 6 against Boston, but then rounds 2 and 3, 3-goal games where we were used to the Florida Panthers the season before scoring 4-5 goals a game in their present trophy winning season. But this also gives a lot of credit to Paul Maurice, and as far as instead of the run and gun style, the aggressive forechecking, the scoring opportunities with 5 seconds within a turnover as well. I mean, yeah, the Florida Panthers are still one of those teams who leads as far as shots on goal per game, but as far as when it came to the playoffs, and especially in game 3 of the Eastern Conference Final, where they were outshot by almost double by the Carolina Hurricanes, but they still found the way to create those scoring opportunities, especially because their power play was so much better in this playoff run than it was in the year prior. 1 for 31 in their 10 playoff games in 2022. And that percentage was a lot better as well. So Bob was the least of the Florida Panthers problems in 2022 when they were swept by Tampa Bay, but this time around the offense helped them, and that's why. And thanks to Matthew Tkachuk as well, who went into God mode. Both him and Bobrovsky went into God mode in that series. 3-game winning goals in the Eastern Conference Final. Bobrovsky thankfully got the help that he needed in that playoff run.
Now, one thing that you nailed last year, we asked for your breakout candidate on the Florida Panthers, and you said Gustav Forsling, and he was unreal, over 40 points, one of the more impressive players on the back end. Who's somebody this year that needs to have a big season if the Panthers are going to make it back to the playoffs? And maybe someone other than Spencer Knight, because I think we all know, as a goalie-friendly show here at Locked On Senators, that if you don't have a goalie, you don't have anything.
I'm gonna pick 2, and both of them are gonna be forwards actually. Eetu Luostarinen for the Panthers is one. He is a guy who could play on any line. He could play wing. He could play center. He is great in all 3 zones as well. Doesn't produce the amount of points, but when the Florida Panthers, when he had played his first full season with the Florida Panthers in the 2021 season, you know, he was a healthy scratch a lot of the time, not getting a lot of his playing time, but slowly developing. And then once Paul Maurice came into the mix, one of his first media availabilities was he is a top 9 player. He emphasized that with Eetu Luostarinen. And even when Anton Lundell was struggling as well, the Etulis Serena was able to take that 3C spot and kind of hold the fort there, and he earned himself a little bit of an extension as well. And the other one, you might, this might be a shocking one because you're thinking this guy is a multi-time 30 goal scorer for the Panthers. He has 32 power play goals in the last 2 years, but this one is also Sam Reinhart. For the Florida Panthers and Sam Reinhart, he's in a contract year and didn't get off to the best of starts last season. His first goal in the season last year came in game number 12, which he scored 2 of those on the road against Anaheim, and definitely one who needs a great start this season for the Panthers, as a guy who is also one who could play up and down in the top 9. But as far as where he succeeded the most, it's been on that third line with Lundell and Luostarinen as well for him. So definitely the scoring punch is definitely gonna be crucial for someone like Sam Reinhart as well. And maybe an honorable mention, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who is bought out by the Vancouver Canucks as well, likely going to be the quarterback on the power play for the Panthers. And he's also trying to get some term on his next contract as he's trying to get like a second chance or third chance in this instance.
Now, we kind of talked about from our perspective as covering the Senators. All right, are the Senators going to be able to knock one of those 4 teams out? We both, I hate to break it to you, Armando, but like Ross said, we pegged the Florida Panthers as a team that they could take down possibly. Do you believe that the Panthers put themselves in a better position with the offseason additions and subtractions, or a worse position to make the playoffs this year? And considering how other teams in the Atlantic have bolstered their lineups as well.
I think when you think about what Bill Zito worked for what he had, I think you have a certain amount of resources that are at your disposal. No draft capital, barely any cap space as well. And you gotta go out and make those value signings as well. Can OEL be that value signing for the Panthers? There's quite that possibility while waiting for the other guys to return to the lineup as well. There could be that, and for the even in the on the fourth line, Steven Lorentz, who the Panthers, they needed to beef up a little bit this offseason because they got bullied in the Stanley Cup final. The not only were the Vegas Golden Knights a lot bigger, but they showed it. And really, when it came to Vegas, they were able to block shots and help Adin Hill as well, something that the Florida Panthers had a hard time with. And you got someone beefier on that fourth line in Steven Lorentz as well. Kevin Stenlund is going to be someone on that bottom six on that bottom line as well. And Ryan Lomberg, who's the ultimate grinder, played the Stanley Cup playoffs with a broken thumb as well. That's definitely going to be key, and definitely that blue line as well. So working with what he had, I believe Bill Zito did his best. As far as playoff positioning, outside, if I'm taking the Florida Panthers lens off, they're one of the hardest teams to predict coming into this season, and what they're going to do. And it's all going to start right before American Thanksgiving, before that first benchmark. So maybe reevaluate a little bit of things before that once the Florida Panthers do get to that point. And we are with that we are going to transition to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss more about the Ottawa Senators and the Florida Panthers, and Ottawa's chances to break through from the 3 teams that rebuilds are step by step, but are the Senators going to be that team to take that next step? We're going to discuss that more here on this crossover edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers and Locked On Ottawa Senators.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to this crossover edition between the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and Locked On Ottawa Senators podcast. Thank you for making both of our podcasts your first listen of the day. I'm with Brandon Pillar and Ross Levitan of Locked On Senators. And guys, the conversation all off season long has been the three teams in the Atlantic trying to take that next step. And just for my listeners, let me list out a few of the injuries that Ottawa dealt with last season. Jacob Chikrin, Josh Norris. We mentioned Anton Forsberg earlier. Thomas Chabot missed a little bit of time. As far as their blue line, as far as top four, I like Ottawa's blue line better than Detroit's, almost at the same level of Buffalo's. I do like their goaltending situation better than Buffalo's. With Buffalo, here's the thing: Devin Levi is hopefully going to be the number one for them for the foreseeable future. But one thing Buffalo did not do was get a veteran in the mix for them to mentor. So if it hits the fan, Buffalo could be in trouble there. And I like how they can outscore their issues. But in order to win, you got to win those low scoring games. And can Buffalo do that? I don't know. But from the Sens perspective of things, how do you see how what it takes for them to take that next step to finally get back to the postseason for the first time since 2017? Because we talked about the ownership earlier. We talked about DJ Smith's seat being a little hotter than possibly Pierre Dorian's. And of course, that thing from a few years ago, the rebuild is over. How do you guys see this?
I think the Ottawa Senators have put themselves in a good position here, Armando. And I think what they did is they identified needs that they had, and they did a good job of finding people that can hopefully fill in those needs that they had. They needed bottom six scoring. Dominic Kubalik is a guy that he had 20 goals last year with the Red Wings. He scored 30 goals as a rookie in Chicago. He's probably going to be on that third line, and he hopefully can provide some offense to the bottom six. Then obviously Alex DeBrincat didn't exactly work out in Ottawa, but they still got to replace the 27 goals and 66 points he had. And Vladimir Tarasenko, if he can be healthy, that's a guy that scored 30 goals multiple times. He has Stanley Cup. He's a Stanley Cup winner. He's got playoff experience. So he's someone that can come into that top six and add the punch that they were hoping Alex DeBrincat could. And then in goaltending, that's the biggest question for the Ottawa Senators. They had 7 different goalies play for them last year. A lot of those guys, just young guys coming up and simply out of default having to play for the Ottawa Senators. Now they've got a nice tandem, and the NHL is really transitioning to more of a tandem style goaltending league where there's lots of 1A, 1B type situations in the crease rather than your prototypical starter that's going to have 60 games and then a backup that just plays the second half of back-to-backs and gives the guy a break once in a while. And the nice thing is Korpisalo and Anton Forsberg, these guys already have experience playing together as a tandem. Both of them were a part of Columbus's affiliate team, the Cleveland Monsters, and they won a Calder Cup there. So they're buddies. They already know, yep, Pierre Dorian loves winners. Those guys have won before together. And I think as long as we can see good health from both of them, this team has enough scoring up front. The top six is really good. Bottom six bolstered, like I mentioned. And then that D-core is much better this year than it has been in a long, long time. And I think Jake Sanderson is going to take a step that's going to really show people that haven't watched a lot of him and maybe criticize this new contract extension. He's going to show them that he is well worth that money. So overall, the depth and the kind of the issues that they had last season, it looks like they made proper moves and adjustments to cover up for those mistakes this year.
And one thing just to build on that, and you began the conversation, Armando, talking, Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit to a lesser extent. I think Steve Yzerman would tell you they're a year away from kind of being in that same conversation. You look, they kind of had a lot of filler pieces brought in this offseason on the back end while their young kids are marinating in Grand Rapids. So I really want to focus on Buffalo and Ottawa as kind of the cross-examination here. And they can both score. Like Buffalo scored almost 300 goals last year. It was insane, right? Tage Thompson's got one of the best mixtapes in the NHL. I think he leads the league in goals where the goalie's laying on his back by the end of it, where he just gets dangled and they just put it away. Okay, so we're not taking anything away from what Buffalo has. They have 2 first overall picks on their back end with Dalian and Power. But a 21-year-old goalie, I get it. He's a stud. Devin Levi will be a stud. 7th round pick. Panthers fans know all about that, but you got to give to get. They end up getting Sam Reinhart in that deal. I get it. But that is so much to ask of a goalie, and that's where Ottawa saw that last year. They had a 21-year-old goalie who had to get put in a tough situation, high pedigree, Mad Sogard, and it was up and down. He was rookie of the month 1 month, and then the next month it didn't go his way. So it's one of those where that's kind of the trajectory you see every young goalie go through, and I think that they really missed by not getting a veteran presence. I think if they have Connor Hellebuck, I don't care what they would have had to give up from the prospect pool, and they have a ton of guys: Yuri Kulich, Savoy, Benson. They have all these kids who aren't going to be a part of the team this year, but will be big parts going forward. They could afford to pay the price to get a guy like that in. They have the cap space as well. I think it was a huge miss for Buffalo not doing that while they have Power on his entry-level contract, while they have Dalian 1 more year at $6 million. I think a huge miss for them doing that. Whereas Ottawa, they're taking a big gamble on Korpisalo, 5-year term, but the price is right at $4 million per. And that, to me, it's going to be goaltending that makes or breaks it, because both teams can score. Both teams have some studs on the back end. I really think it's going to come down to coaching and goaltending, and that I probably give Buffalo the edge for coaching, and I give Ottawa the edge for goaltending right now. So I think it's going to be fascinating. And if you want to mix in Florida, I think they've obviously got the experience in there that they've shown they can do it, whereas Ottawa and Buffalo are still trying to inch their way closer to that same goal.
Yeah, and you talk about the assets to trade. Yuri Kulich was the 1st round pick that the Buffalo Sabres used with that Sam Reinhart pick that they traded, and a great year for Yuri Kulich out in Rochester for the Buffalo Sabres. And then when you talk about with I quickly looked at the season series between the Florida Panthers and the Ottawa Senators. Forsberg started the first one, Sogard started the second and the third, and it was
didn't Marilainen play in one of them?
Say again? No.
Yeah, Levi Marilainen, didn't he? He got put in relief. That crazy game with all the fights at the
the fights. Brady Tkachuk ended up being in the suite after the fact as well. So definitely that was the craziest game as far as closer to the end. But also the Florida Panthers season actually changed in their matchup in March, where they gave up 3 shorthanded goals against the Ottawa Senators, and then after that was when the Florida Panthers made their run. Because
Armando, you declared the Panthers season dead.
Yeah,
yes, I did.
At that point,
yes, I did. I said it was over, and then Paul Maurice goes on his rant. Keith Tkachuk goes on Toronto radio and calls them, some certain names.
I wish they could play more like the Ottawa Senators. I think was the exact thing he said. So and up there in Ottawa, they don't have a whole lot of skill, but they work hard. That's what he said.
And like you said, Ross, it wasn't really about record. It was more about heart when it came to the Panthers, and just saying, hey, what are you gonna do to battle it out? The Florida Panthers were that team to have the expectations versus what the Ottawa Senators had. I mean, you're coming off a President's Trophy winning season, obviously, but and then it's like, what are you doing? And after that, I'm looking at the date right now. It was March 27th. After that, that's when the season turned around for the Florida Panthers. And hey, it was you see 6-1-1 to end the season. Thank you, Alex Lyon, for getting the Panthers there. And look what happens. They're Eastern Conference champions. And that was the moment. That time where rock bottom for the season, and then all of a sudden they skyrocket. So hopefully they don't have to be in that position come next season for sure.
Now, what's the atmosphere like for Florida Panthers fans? Like, are they kind of like resting on, well, we made it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals last year, like whatever happens this year doesn't really matter, that was an incredible run? Or is the vibe still kind of like, well, we lost in the Stanley Cup Finals this year, we want to win it all? Like, where are fans' excitement levels at?
I think the excitement level is definitely for sure to be back, but this is hard. It's not easy to win in the cup. I mean, you think about the amount of teams who have had multiple tries to win a cup. Tampa Bay is definitely one that sticks out. Colorado, it took a while to get out of round two. The Florida Panthers got a little bit of their taste with two consecutive seasons of one getting the President's Trophy and winning a playoff series and then going all the way. The expectation is still to win one round and to actually, still continuing on the culture there for the Florida Panthers. And if for me personally, I can't speak for everyone. If I see at least one playoff series win this coming season, and you're still creating the trajectory to hopefully eventually lift Lord Stanley's Cup. So it's just trying to continue on, and if you are swept out of the first round or out of the postseason, it doesn't necessarily erase what happens in the first in the last few seasons, but you definitely have more questions. But if you do win a series or maybe even two, you are still signaling to like other free agents that this is a place to come to. This is a place that that has a lot of stability when it comes to its core. Matthew Tkachuk, Alexander Barkov, and all as two guys who are going to be here for the long haul. And definitely it's very important to at least get that far as far as that. As far as winning the Stanley Cup, I'll be honest. I'm definitely not at that point yet for the Florida Panthers. But as far as still trying to create that destination franchise label, that's where you want to be.
I got a quick follow-up question though, because you mentioned Tampa there. Is there part of Florida Panthers fans that, there's this little brother, big brother syndrome? Is part of it just like, hey, if we do better than Tampa, that's a successful season? Like, is that at all kind of a mindset or no?
I don't. It's not really something. Honestly, I don't really. It's not really something that I subscribe to too much because in order for something to be a rivalry, you got to be able to beat them as well. And Tampa has owned Florida as well throughout their two playoff series, one of them being in a sweep as well. So yeah, from division, from state wise, it's a rivalry. But as far as facing off in a playoff series, which is why I wanted the Tampa Bay Lightning to beat the Maple Leafs so that they could get another shot again at Tampa Bay. I know people talk about quote unquote easier matchups, but as far as finally getting over that hump and having something to brag about, I wanted the Florida Panthers to face the Tampa Bay Lightning again. But hey, they made it to the Stanley Cup final even with defeating the Leafs. So if they get an opportunity again, man, would that be not? Then we could call it a rivalry between the two teams.
Armando, final question from me. Which was the easiest playoff series for the Panthers last summer, and why was it the Leafs?
It was definitely the Leafs because John Tavares nor Austin Matthews scored, and 2 power play goals for the Toronto Maple Leafs in that series. I mean, and they were second in the NHL in the regular season, right behind Edmonton in that. And Sergei Bobrovsky, he definitely, that was definitely the beginning of that incredible run. And Boston was definitely a difficult one because their PK percentage was at 59% in that one. That was a really tough series to get through. But once they got through, they had all the confidence that they could get through. And it just, think about it like this. Game 7 of the first round and game 1 of the next round was only a day apart. So they were quickly able to transition versus a little worried between rounds 2 and 3 because there was a week off, but that momentum still continued. Every single game was a 1-score game, even though it was the hardest sweep that the Florida Panthers could ask for as well. But then 9 days off between the Stanley Cup final. But you even saw, regardless of days off, the Panthers were battered and bruised, and those were injuries that were not just going to heal in 9 days.
Now, final question for me is, I was just looking through the schedule for the Sens. They play the Florida Panthers 4 times, and most notably twice in the final month of April. Armando, what's your prediction for the season record between the Ottawa Senators and Florida Panthers?
I'll say like 2-1-1. maybe somewhere around there. 2-1-1
For who?
for Florida. Get an they'll get an OTL possibly as well there. But 2 wins. I mean, one of the best home teams in the last few years as well. It's a really tough team for anyone to go on the road and beat the Panthers. So I'm gonna say 2-1-1 there for the Panthers. How about you guys?
Well, kind of interesting. Ottawa and Florida will play in the preseason up in Cape Breton in Nova Scotia. So that'll
October
be
1st.
Kind of a cool area. I don't know if you've ever been up to that area, but really, really cool part of the world. And I think it'll be a sweet atmosphere there for in front of a lot of people who, don't get to always see a lot of NHL action. So, man, is there a connection with Nova Scotia and Florida? Because I know that Ottawa's going there, so is Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh obviously has Sidney Crosby. Ottawa's got Drake Batherson, and to a lesser extent, Igor Sokolov, Kevin Mandolese. They've drafted out of Cape Breton quite a bit. So I'm curious why the Panthers of all teams are going up there.
Yeah, I'm seeing. It's funny because you have a whole lot of Ontario boys on the roster. I mean, funny enough, game one.
They had more than Toronto, didn't they, when they played the Leafs?
I believe so, because all 4 goal scorers were guys from Ontario.
Awesome.
As well. Brandon Montour, one of them, Nick Cousins, Sam Bennett. So there's a whole bunch of guys from Ontario. So I'd have to quickly look it up, and as far as that, so definitely got to look up that. I didn't do my research there. Apologies
I was putting you on the spot. I just thought it was interesting that the Panthers, because it's not like it's a 5-minute flight to get up to Nova Scotia from Florida down on the coast. So I just found that interesting, but it'll be cool to kick it off. I'll say 2-1 for Ottawa then. That's
Okay.
what I'll go with.
You need one more game. They play 4 times.
They play 4. I just searched it up and it only showed 3. Are you counting the October 1st one, Pills?
No, I don't think so. Like,
you shouldn't be, because it's a divisional opponent.
Twice in April and once in February, and then I think once
November.
Yeah, so that's 4.
Yeah,
math guy.
1, 2, 3, 4.
November 27th, February 27th, April 4th, and April 9th.
I'll say 3-1 for Ottawa. Let's go. It's a big divisional matchup here. I got my guys.
Yeah, I'll go with Armando's record, but flipped. I think 2-1-1 is a pretty safe bet there, because these 2 teams, when they play each other, it's who knows what's going to happen. They've had some absolutely wild games recently, and going in both teams' favors. So I think it's going to be quite close.
No doubt, and definitely gotta revisit this next season about this prediction for sure. So guys, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, and a crossover with the guys over at Locked On Senators. You can follow them at Sen Central on X. You could also follow Brandon at Brandon Pillar 1, Ross Levitan at Ross Levitan. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Guys, thank you so much for doing this, and I hope to see you guys soon.
Thanks, Armando. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the start to the season.
Yep. Thanks for having us.
You as well. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers and Locked On Senators podcasts your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.